What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about consistency and why consistency is important. I got my good friend Mike here, another Marine who can definitely talk about the topic of consistency. It's very relevant, obviously, in the Marine Corps. And so we're going to kind of collaborate. We're going to talk about different experiences of ours. And we got a good friend, Carl, over here running the set. So appreciate you, Carl. But today we're going to talk about consistency and what consistency means and why consistency is so important. And I always like to back up what I talk. I'm very big about that. So we're going to talk about the relevance of consistency and how the consistency plays out even in the Bible. So consistency, to me, I saw the example of consistency many times in my life. In my own life as a kid, my dad set the example of how to be consistent. My dad literally was up before the roosters every morning, and he went to work every day, no matter, how he felt, whether he was sick, how he felt, if he was under the weather, or if he didn't feel like going to work because he had some challenge, he went anyway. So I got to see consistency at a very, very, very early age as a young kid, and my dad never broke that mold. For a lot of kids, man, in society, they don't get that example. Their family life is very unstable. They don't see consistency. They're broken. They got no direction. And so we're going to talk about that today and why that's relevant in the form of securing your perimeter. So, Mike, let's talk about consistency in your life, man. In the Marine Corps, you obviously had structure. We've talked before. Talk to me a little bit about your family life, your home life, when you were a kid and how you saw consistency in your parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It started at a young age with my father. He was a Marine as well, so it was kind of instilled in me to be consistent, professional, disciplined, all that good stuff. So, yeah, my father would always, when he was home, he was always a truck driver, so he was on the road quite a bit, and still building that kind of consistency was kind of tough. But it was his discipline that would create that, the ability to consider or keep that concentration of consistency. So let's say, you act a fool when he's gone. You're,
What?
Yeah, right. You act a fool when he's gone, and then he comes home. You didn't want to, get the repercussions when he got home. So you made sure you were consistent. You weren't going to get that spanking or, discipline when he gets home. But yeah, he always taught me as being a young man, being disciplined and consistent in your life is one of the two best quality traits of a man can have. So it was just instilled in me. My mother was no joke either. She made sure that was every morning we would have the same consistency in that retrospect.
Routine.
Yeah, it's routine. So you wake up, go to school, do all your things in between, like brush your hair, take a shower, all that good stuff. So that's consistent. And being consistent in that way teaches you to be a better person when you grow up as an adult.
Yeah, so, excuse me. So let's talk through that a little bit, man, because I know how it played out for me in the Marine Corps. When I joined the Marine Corps, all of that came to harvest when I joined the Marine Corps. And I got to see all the benefits of all that consistency and discipline my dad promoted in me and how that played out in the Marine Corps and the value it brought me. Literally, it was like priceless gold, man, when I joined the Marine Corps, because a lot of the things we did in the Marine Corps was repetition and consistency, right? They beat that into your brain housing group. Mm-hmm. And so talk to me about that. How did that play out for you when you joined the Marine Corps? Did you get to see the fruits of your dad's labor of, pounding that in your head as a kid, how to be consistent, how to be disciplined, how to show up every time? How did that play out for you?
It absolutely helped. I'm not going to lie. But going in the Marine Corps is a completely different animal. I think I became better a man because of the Marine Corps. I was good because of my father. I think I would have been fine without going in the Corps, but I became even better because of the Corps. But yeah, when as soon as you touch those yellow footprints, that's when you know it's game on.
All bets are off.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's a reality check, So, but it was something I wanted to do since I was a little child. Plus my father, being a Marine, I've always kind of, and I have a long line of family members that were in the military. Grandfather was in World War II, Korea. I even have a cousin that KIA was in Vietnam.
Oh wow, man.
But we have a long history of that. So, yeah, when it comes to the Marine Corps, the consistency hits you right off the bat,
Sure.
and you don't even know what's going on until it's like a ton of bricks just dropping onto you. You don't even know what they're saying either. Like they talk so fast, everything's so fast, it's chaos. But then you learn to control that chaos, and you learn to understand the chaos, and you embrace it.
Yeah, sure, man.
So
even as a kid, man, you were raised obviously in a very similar household as me. My dad was very regimented. My dad was systematic. My dad was constant. Consistency was his middle name. He did stuff by routine every day, day in and day out. And so for me, he was the living, breathing example of being consistent. So joining the Marine Corps, though, I got to see the fruits of all that. I talked about that a little bit, like it all came flooding in when the drill instructors, you're doing things by the numbers. And I'm like, I'm so used to this. Like my dad didn't do things by the numbers, but he just did it time in and time out. Like he just constantly. And I think that breeds a certain kind of man in today's society or in any society because it teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to be systematic and how to show up every time, no matter, what you're facing. And so it was like, it was a training as a young kid. And then when I joined the Marine Corps, like you said, I think it refined me as a man because it tuned up my carburetors a little bit. And what I mean by that is I was used to discipline. So when we were when I was in the Corps, went through basic training, and then I graduated basic training, I'm not saying I made it look easy because it definitely wasn't easy. It was definitely, like you said, a whole different animal when you join the Marine Corps because there's challenges on every level. You're not just dealing with, a drill instructor who's screaming in your face. You're dealing with, I got to swim to the point of failure. I've got to run to the point of failure. I've got to do physical training to the point of failure. I've got to think to the point of failure. Like I have to do land navigation. I've never done that before, to the point of failure, and weapons handling and weapons engagement. There's so many things, but all of that consistency that my dad taught me as a kid played out to get pushed through anything because it promoted discipline. And I think that's the biggest thing. So how was that for you? I mean, obviously, Marines are very disciplined, that's the whole nature of the Marine Corps, being very disciplined and, not slacking, right? So how did that play out for you, even in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, let's build a point of just consistency and repetition, right? As we do drill in the Marine Corps, it's very, very important. It builds that discipline, that unit cohesion, that repetition.
That's big, yeah.
So one heel, one slap of the rifle, everything is all as one unit. We learn that from day one in boot camp.
Yep.
And it's very important to have that kind of consistency and repetition as a fighting unit, because you all think on one level, one mind.
Yeah.
And you guys follow orders like that, like a flick of the wrist, flick of the snap of the fingers, we used to say. Yep. But it's also the grooming standards. Let's go with grooming. Okay, a lot of sometimes Marines think it's stupid, but it's very important. Let's think about the grooming standards of that point. Like what's his name? It says in Generation Kill. I don't know if you ever watched that, but he always say like the grooming standards of the mustaches, right? Yeah, mustaches. You all look like Elvises and stuff like that. Well, the Marines try to sometimes always get a little bit creepier with that mustache. It goes down that lip,
Yeah,
right?
caterpillar mustache.
Yeah. We call it the field stash, right? So,
Yeah.
but the fact is that it's important. That grooming standard of shaving is not only helps seal the face mask. Let's say if there's a chemical or biological weapon agent in the warfare, but also keeps you clean. You don't look nasty. You know what I mean?
You don't get parasites on your face.
Parasites on your face, stuff like that, crazy stuff like that. Starching your cover, blousing your boots, tighten your sleeves when you roll them, stuff like that. It's very important. I was always like that as a Marine. I made sure. Well, we used to brush our boots. We never shined them. So
sorry to hear that, man.
but I would always brush my boots every morning. Get that dirt off of there.
Yeah.
It's just that, like you said, my father. Again, going back to that as a home life, always was still that in me. To keep pride in yourself as a man, keep that grooming standard as a man, and then it applies when you get older and older as it comes to professional jobs and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, dude. And as you're talking about that, dude, you bring up so many elements about that because discipline is critical because to me, consistency builds discipline, and discipline promotes muscle memory. Because in combat, you train, and then one day, if you're blessed, you get to actually execute all your training, and apply it, right? And so obviously we've both been to Iraq, we've both been in combat. We apply all those skills, and it comes through in muscle memory because it's what you're naturally used to. You're so used to repetition that it just becomes second nature. Muscle memory is second nature, and part of the importance about consistency is to promote muscle memory, to do the same thing every time. But this applies to not just people, not just because you go in the Marine Corps and only to Marines. It's Navy SEALs, it's Army Rangers, it's pararescue, it's civilians, But I think it's critical, especially in today's society, for men to be consistent. Because if their kids don't see consistency, they're all over the place and they're so flaky, man. They're so flighty because they fall apart. It's like they never stick to anything. And you literally can watch people, especially in the civilian populace, literally crumble and fall apart because they won't stick to anything. It's like the job got hard, so I quit. Well, what did that do? Well, I taught my boss. You didn't teach your boss anything, dude. He's going to go on just like he did before. And if he's a jerk, he's just going to be a jerk to the next person. You got to stick with it. Well, it was tough. I was on a 5-mile run and I quit at mile 1. Okay, you're not teaching yourself anything. You just teach yourself to quit. You've got to push through it. And, Jocko Willink talks a lot about that. David Goggins talks a lot about that. Obviously, Navy SEALs. There's a lot of Marines that talk about that, and so you've got to push through it. And I think that's the biggest thing about consistency to me in muscle memory is it even applies, physically, mentally. I got this challenge with this person. You got to see it through, man. You got to be consistent because if you see it through, no matter what that challenge is, physical or mental, you have to see it through. You have to be consistent. You have to show up. In we talked about the Bible. In the book of Proverbs, I want to say it's Proverbs 24:16, something like that. A righteous man falls down 7 times, and a righteous man gets up, 7 times. But how does it go, man? It's a righteous man falls down and gets up 7 times. But a person that is not righteous in nature, falls to calamity, because they don't keep getting up. Like they break, they crumble,
Quit.
I always train my kids, man, train my kids, teach my kids. I train my kids to be consistent in everything. And I tell my kids, don't bend, bow, or break to anything or anyone. Don't bend, bow, or break. People are going to get you to break all day long, and people do it unnaturally. They don't even realize they're trying to get you to quit at anything, but they are. Oh, just quit that job. You don't need that job. No, you do. You need the experience. You need to go through it, man. You need to be challenged. You need something to tap your inner core. Whether you're doing it physically, mentally, socially, you've got a person that's hard to deal with. We all have a person that's hard to deal with. But you have to see it through, try to work with that person, man. Figure out a way that you can relate to that person. And so I think that's the important thing about consistency that's so critical, man. And it's not just today's society. Everybody's like, oh, this new generation. Dude, this new generation is just like you were when you were of their age. You were the same young, dumb punk that these kids are today, right? It's not just this new generation. Because history repeats itself, and we know generation after generation, you got the same type of person. You got type A personalities, you got lazy people, you got weak people, you got strong people. And so, for me, man, consistency played out, and it's just, luckily, I had a good example growing up. My dad was very regimented, and my dad was no nonsense about everything. He didn't joke and humor about certain things. Don't get me wrong, my dad laughed and joked, like anybody else does. But when it came down to business, it was, hey, no talk, all action. And so for me, that just resonated with me, and it plays out to who I am today. It's my DNA, right? Because consistency built that muscle memory. And I think that's why it was so important. And so when I was in, boot camp, I think back to the kids that, young recruits at that point, that were just so flabbergasted by what to do, what's coming next, and they would literally just fall apart. And I'm like, dude, get a hold of yourself, man. This is just, we're just going, this is a process.
Yeah, I saw guys crumble, like in the fetal position.
Oh, yeah, man.
Like, it was just like, what? It's not that bad, man.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They're just not used to that. And the chaos just erupted on them, like I said, a ton of bricks. Hit him in like an anvil or whatever, just like the coyote and
the
Roadrunner, right?
Yeah, man.
So they would just crumble, and it's just like, dude, it's not bad. Like the guy was like 6'5", man. He was a big dude.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was laying down on the ground crying.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I'm only 5'4". And I'm looking down on this guy like, it's not really that bad, bro.
Man. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, and you just nailed a great point, man. You're like, it's not that bad because in your mind, your muscle memory just defaults to that repetition that you learned as a young kid and as a Marine. And even now today, man, even with my own kids, I'm very methodical with my kids. I let my kids think on their own. I don't try to solve all their problems for them. I let them think through it, right? Because I want to build that inner core that allows them to develop tenacity to get through those challenges and those hard things, right? Trying to get along with their sibling or have to do this chore. I have this responsibility, or I've got to do this homework assignment, or I've got to deal with this difficult kid at school. And I make them make their own decisions. I make them think through it. I don't try to solve all their problems. And so I think, we look at, and everyone knows, the whole world around us is, it seems like it's all crumbling and falling apart, socially, economically, politically, they're saying, but, and without getting into politics, that's a whole
different animal.
Yeah, it's a whole different animal, man. That's a very deep well. It's important to see consistency because it builds, like you said, team cohesion. I mean, even in our own company, man, it's like we're a very tight-knit team because it's important we fight through things as a team instead of, well, that's not my job. That's Billy's job or that's Joey's job. No, man, it's all your job. You've all got to do it. And so Navy SEALs all have to carry the boat. Marine Raiders all have to carry the boat. That boat is heavy for everybody, not just you, dude. Like, and I remember being on teams, man, on boat teams, amphibious element for the MEU that I was on. Those boats were not Those boats were
No,
not light
they're
by
not.
any stretch of the imagination, and they were tough. And David Goggins calls it sugar cookies. In the sand. Oh man, I got sugar cookied so many times, man. Rolling in the sand. Being wet and cold and miserable.
Getting raw spots all over your elbows,
Raw
your knees,
spots all
yeah.
over. Yeah, getting your butt cheeks chafed, and yeah, man.
All kinds of fun.
But that consistency of doing it repetitiously, built that discipline and allowed us the breakthrough of pushing through it, because you got to see how many times we flip boats, man, hitting the tide. The hardest thing about splashing, man, is literally going through the tide, getting out in the ocean and bouncing on the waves. Doing a 15-mile transit to the ship was cold, miserable, no doubt. But the initial splash was the hardest because you had to break through the first waves. And so we would literally break through, oh my gosh, man, 4 or 5 sets of waves and flip the boat every time because, the coxswain or the acoxswain, if the boat was pointed, left or right, canted to the left or the right too much, the boat would just flip. And that's why, I learned really quick why you de-ring all your gear and your weapon, because trash just goes everywhere, and Marines get flipped out, and then you gotta stand up and flip the boat back over, because usually it flipped it on its top. And so you had to get on the boat and flip it. So that repetition, man, just the consistency, builds muscle memory, and it builds strength, core strength. And so for you, even now, like, talk to me about how all of that training, that you did in the Marine Corps and that repetition plays out now. Like, how does that play out now in your everyday life?
Well, you had so many talking points though earlier about, even the nuclear family and stuff like that. So that's another thing I want to go back.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, training, we'll do that first. Yeah, so we're going to go beyond boot camp. I think everybody has a good idea what that is. It's just the basics and what we were just talking about as boot camp.
Yeah.
So let's go Fleet Marine Corps. That's where the real training and the real fun goes in, right?
Yeah,
so,
man.
Yeah, so when you do, like, let's say mount training, okay? It's very important. It's very dangerous warfare, and it's very important to be consistent. And repetition is very important, as well as clearing a building, So if you don't have that unit cohesion of knowing what that first guy or that second guy or that third guy is going to do, and then you have your support element, right?
Yep.
So you could even, if you get so tight with it, you can just do hand signals or stuff like that before you even go into a building, and you know exactly what that one guy is going to do and the guy behind you is going to do. Because when I was in Ramadi, it was very important, especially all that training that we did, not only in Camp Lejeune before I went out. That was just the basics, though. That was just, I was an MCT, but the real training goes into the fleet.
Yeah.
So being a grunt with batteries allowed me to have that kind of training. So I would get attached to a bunch of infantry units and stuff like that, and so I knew my place, So when I was the first guy in, I would tell the guy, hey, I'm going left, and he would know. And that repetition, that consistency, that discipline that everybody has, and knowing what their job assignment is very, very important. So I clear left, I know that guy's going to clear right, and I know that third guy is going to come in straight.
Yep.
So that's when you knew we're going to be one heck of a team. One unit cohesion is really, really nice, and it's key.
Yeah.
Jungle warfare, movement under fire, right? Well, the old saying is the Marine Corps. No movement under fire is stupid. Movement without fire is suicide.
Yeah.
So you would have to, combined arms is very important as well. And my job as a field radio operator was, consistency of making sure mortars knows what's going on, artillery knows what's going on.
Yeah.
My communication was key in that aspect. Also, communications needs to stay up.
Yep.
That was my job. And not only that, tote the rifle and get into the fight. So, let's say we all know each other's job, right? We have to. So therefore, the machine gunner goes down. You're the closest man. What do you got to do?
Got to
Grab
be
that
the machine gunner. That's right. Yeah.
So that's when that comes into play. It's consistent, unit cohesion,
Yep.
discipline, professionalism. That's all tied into one.
It all comes full circle, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, man. And I guess, as you're talking about that, you make me realize that, that full circle means full circle. It's
Yes.
everything. It all comes into this, all streams lead to the same ocean, right? Into the same pond. And so, and those moments of clarity, man, is like, it's so muscle memory that it's just so natural. But you don't think that your motor skills are that finely tuned until you actually have to apply it. When that dude goes down, now you're the aid and litter team, or you're the machine gunner, or you're the A gunner, or you're the navigator, or you're the point man, or you're the rear security. But it's so natural, and I think that's and I think what a lot of people are looking for is just direction. There's a lot of even young kids now that aren't really weak. It's not that they're weak; it's that they don't have that direction, right? They don't know.
Exactly.
So, and so for the audience here and for the community that we're collaborating with, that we're talking to, consistency is critical. It is one of the most innate, natural things you can do that promotes growth. It's always important to grow. I tell everybody, even in my own business, if you're not growing, you're dying. You have to grow. You have to develop every day. You have to be consistent. You get up, you exercise. I don't care if it's, you're doing yoga, you're doing calisthenics, or you go for a run, or you're just weight training. Do something. Get up and be consistent with that, because then you're training your body, your mind, and your soul to develop that muscle memory. And I was listening to a podcast with Shipley, DJ Shipley, and he talks, and I want to say it was on the Sean Ryan show. He talked about, he said, I don't drink because I always want to be ready. And it literally, it resonated with me because I'm the same exact way. I don't really drink a lot. I, occasionally would have a beer or even a glass of wine. But I always want to be at the ready. It's just how I'm trained, right? It's how you're trained. And he said, what if I'm out and there's a terrible accident? I want to be alert and I want to be sober-minded so that I can respond and help that person. And I thought that was awesome, man. And that demonstrates that muscle memory we're talking about and the consistency. Like when he got out of the Navy, he didn't shut that switch off. Like he's still very much a Navy SEAL by the way he thinks, right?
That's funny. I catch myself quite a bit doing this. I'll go like in a public place, and I'll right off the bat I'll start counting how many people are in the room.
How many people are in the room?
Where's the exits?
Right.
Like where's egress points, stuff like that. How am I going to attack if an attacker comes in?
That's right.
What am I going to do if this scenario happens? So I have like about 12 different scenarios that go on in my mind every time I walk into a building.
Yeah, man.
It's kind of crazy. I thought I was the only crazy one doing that. So thank you for refreshing me that I'm not. But yeah, I find myself doing that quite a bit. So that's where you come back to that consistency. I do it all the time because of repetition and because of being consistent in our training.
Yeah.
But just thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah, man, and to go back into that, Mattis was famous for a lot of quotes. One of the ones that resonate with me the most is, be professional, be polite, but I have a plan to kill everyone in the room. And people are like, he's psychotic. No, dude. Always have a plan. Like you just said, man, when we go into a room, we scan the room. In the Marine Corps, they had the combat hunter program that taught you the ambiance of the room of any environment you're in, whether you're in Mogadishu, whether you're in Somalia, whether you're in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Southern California. When you go into an environment, you walk into a coffee shop, you walk into a movie theater, you scan the area that you're in to see whether you're getting a proxemic push or a proxemic pull. And that's part of that combat hunter program that we were trained on. And, having a plan to kill everyone in the room is, what do you do if you're in an environment and something erupts? I mean, we've all seen these active shooter situations. That goes back to that muscle memory. If you're not trained, you're very vulnerable. But if you're trained, you know what to look for and you know how to respond. Like you said, we're looking for the egress. Man, even at the airport, it drives me crazy. But I go through the airport and everyone's phone is in their face. Mm-hmm. It's like nobody's hypervigilant. And it's like, man, if something went down, I'm probably fighting alone here because nobody is aware of their surroundings. And I tell everybody all the time, man, get your phone out of your face. If you're in an unknown environment, if you're in an environment that's not natural or that you're not familiar with, get your phone out of your face and be hypervigilant. Pay attention to everything around you. Look for the anomalies. The Left of Bang, the book Left of Bang, that Horn wrote. Another Marine that wrote about the combat hunter program. The book's called Left to Bang. It's a phenomenal book. And, you always want to be left of bang. You always want to look for the anomalies in any environment. And again, it's that muscle memory because we're trained, right? We've had the luxury of being trained in the Marine Corps to look for those things. But people who don't need some sense of direction. And so we say, if you need some sense of direction, you've got to start getting consistent in everything you do. Push through whatever it is. It's a challenge. It's a person. The most small, minuscule things really do matter, right? And I think that was really a big key component in the Marine Corps as well because they did the big flash of, the indoctrination of joining the Marine Corps, getting familiar with the Marine Corps way. The most small, minuscule thing like making your rack in the morning, making your bed, right? Gives you a sense of accomplishment, and I think it was the Navy SEAL commander that talked about that, the importance of making your bed every morning. It's consistency. Mm-hmm. It's you did something every morning, and when you do something as simple as make your rack in the morning, make your bed, you already start the day with a sense of accomplishment. I've already accomplished something. If you're one of those people that just roll out of bed and jump in your shoes and head out the door for the day, there's no discipline in that. It's just like you're just rolling out. But roll out and execute something, do something, each and every morning, right? So, I guess we could go ahead and wrap it up now. But this podcast essentially was just meant to talk about the importance of consistency, muscle memory, and promoting discipline. There's a lot of people that don't have that discipline or they let it fall to the wayside. A lot of people get out of the military and they let all that discipline just fall to the wayside. But if you carry that with you, it really does play out and it starts to shape and make form in your life, and I think it's the same. And man, it's a whole different topic, but how that carries then into business as an entrepreneur for me and my business, man, it pays back dividends, when you're disciplined and you're consistent and you have that muscle memory about pushing through something that's difficult or a challenge. So anyway, Mike, it's good to have you on the podcast, man. I appreciate all your feedback. And for those of you out there who lack discipline or lack consistency, join us here on our Secure the Perimeter podcast. We'll talk about this topic along with a lot of other topics that will help shape you and secure your perimeter in your own life. And join us next week for a whole different topic. But thanks for joining.